My name is Marjorie Delacourt, and I'm 79 years old. I've lived on this piece of land in Bramble Creek, Kentucky, for more than 5 decades. The house sits on a gentle hill, with oak trees that have seen my children grow from toddling in the yard to walking out the front gate into their own lives. My husband, Harold, built the porch with his own hands in 1972. Every board, every nail, every creak underfoot was part of the story of my life. It was supposed to be my forever home. It was supposed to be safe. That morning in early spring, the air smelled of wet earth and lilacs. I was on the porch sipping coffee when the mailman's truck pulled up. He looked at me strangely, hesitating before handing over a thick white envelope. "Certified letter, Miss Marjorie," he said. "Needs your signature." I signed without thinking, the pen trembling just enough to smudge my name. When he drove away, I slit the envelope open with the side of my thumb. The words inside didn't make sense at first. Notice to vacate premises. My eyes skimmed down the page. Dates, legal language, the name of some property investment group I'd never heard of. And there, in neat black print, was the sentence that knocked the breath clean out of me. "This property has been transferred to new ownership pursuant to sale, and closing dated February 14th. I reread it twice. 3 times. My name was nowhere on the new deed. I called my son Walter right then and there. "Walter, something's wrong. I just got a letter." He cut me off. "Mom, I was going to tell you. I sold the house." For a moment, all I could hear was the ticking of the old wall clock behind me. "You what?" My voice was barely a whisper. "I sold it," he said again, slower, as if repetition would make it kinder. "Look, the market's hot right now. You don't need all that space and the money." "The money?" My hand tightened around the phone. "Walter, where is it?" There was a pause. "Too long." Then, "It's being handled." Being handled. By him. Without me. I felt the porch board sway beneath me, though I knew it was just me, my knees threatening to give way. "Walter," I said, my voice shaking, "this is my home. Your father built it. You had no right." "It's done," he said flatly. "You'll be fine. I promised I'd take care of you, remember? I've got a plan." But I knew that tone. That careful, clipped tone he used when he'd already made up his mind and wasn't about to change it. When I hung up the phone, my coffee had gone cold. I sat in that rocking chair until the sun slid low, the notice limp in my hand, the letters black and white words burning a hole straight through my chest. Walter thought I had nothing. Walter thought I would have to leave quietly. What Walter didn't know was that deep in the cedar chest at the foot of my bed, wrapped in oilcloth and tucked beneath Harold's old fishing tackle box, lay the original deed to this house, signed, sealed, and still mine in ways he hadn't even thought to look for. And the day I decided to use it would be the day my son lost everything he thought he'd taken from me. If you want to hear how I went from blindsided and betrayed to walking into a lawyer's office with the one thing that could undo all of Walter's plans, stick with me. Like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss any moment. Before Walter became the man who sold my home out from under me, he was just my boy, my late-in-life baby, my miracle. I was 41 when I had him, already the mother of 2 grown daughters who'd flown the nest. He came into the world with a head full of dark hair and a cry that seemed more offended than scared, like he already had opinions about how things should be. Harold beamed from ear to ear when the nurse placed him in my arms. "Our caboose," he whispered. "We'll take care of him until the day we can't." When Harold died of a heart attack just before Walter's 12th birthday, I doubled down on that promise. I did everything I could to make sure Walter never felt the kind of loss I was drowning in. I worked 2 part-time jobs at the library and the diner to keep the house running, made his favorite fried chicken every Sunday, drove him to every baseball practice, every debate meet. I didn't realize it then, but I was also teaching him something I never intended, that I would sacrifice myself for him without hesitation. Walter grew into a charming young man, the kind who knew how to smile just right and make you feel like you were the most important person in the room. When he went to college in Lexington, I sent care packages every month. When he dropped out 2 years later saying he'd found a better opportunity, I didn't question it. I told myself he knew his own path. And every time he stumbled, job layoffs, a divorce that left him with debt, a failed business venture, I opened my door, my wallet, and my heart. We'll figure it out, I'd say. We always do. Looking back, there were signs. Like the time he borrowed $3,000 from my savings to pay off a loan and forgot to pay it back. Or when I overheard him telling a friend that one day the house would be his, so he didn't see the point in me wasting money on repairs. I laughed it off then, told myself he was joking. The truth was, I wanted to believe he'd take care of me when I needed it. He'd said it often enough. "Don't worry, Mom. When the time comes, I'll make sure you're comfortable. You won't have to lift a finger." Those words were a balm to my aging heart. I thought they meant love. I thought they meant protection. But the first real crack came 2 years ago, when my knees went bad and the doctor suggested I might eventually need a hip replacement. Walter sat across from me at this very kitchen table, stirring his coffee while talking about options for the future. "You could downsize," he suggested lightly. "Sell this place, get a condo in town. Less to worry about." "I'm not leaving this house," I told him. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just think about it." I didn't think about it. I shut it down. But I didn't forget the look he gave me. Part calculation, part hunger. And now, sitting here with that eviction notice in my lap, I realized he'd been thinking about it all along. The difference was, so had I. Because Harold was a cautious man, and before he passed, he'd told me something I never told the kids. "Keep the original deed somewhere safe, Marjorie," he'd said. "Paperwork gets lost. Banks make mistakes. But if you've got the original, signed and sealed, you've got the truth." And I still had it. Walter might think he'd closed the door on me. He might think this house was already his victory. But the game wasn't over. Not yet. I didn't sleep the night after Walter told me he'd sold my house. I sat in my recliner, the eviction notice folded neatly on the table beside me, my coffee going cold hours before the sun came up. It wasn't shock anymore. Shock had passed. This was something colder, sharper. Something that made my hands steady instead of shaking. I'd spent my whole life loving my children with an open heart, never locking the door on any of them. But that kind of love has a dangerous flaw. When someone decides to walk through that open door and take what isn't theirs, you're standing there unguarded. Not this time. The first thing I did was dig out the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. It had been years since I'd opened it. The smell of old wood and lavender sachets hit me like a memory. I pulled out Harold's fishing tackle box, moved aside the brittle letters we'd exchanged when he was overseas, and there it was, the oilcloth bundle. Inside was the original deed, just as Harold had given it to me. His handwriting was on the envelope that wrapped it. "Keep this safe." The paper inside was yellowed but still crisp, the signatures in ink that hadn't faded a bit. I ran my fingers over the raised seal, and for the first time in 24 hours, I breathed. Walter hadn't won yet. But I knew better than to wave this paper in his face. You don't play your winning card until the table's quiet and all eyes are on you. So I started small. The next morning I called an old friend, Margaret Boyd. We'd met at church decades ago, back when our kids were in Sunday school together. Margaret's niece, Emily, was a real estate attorney in the county seat. I didn't tell Margaret the whole story, just that I had some property questions and needed someone discreet. Within a day, Emily called me herself. We met at her office the following week. I laid the deed on her desk. She read it slowly, her brow furrowing in concentration. When she looked up, her eyes were sharper. "Mrs. Delacourt, this changes everything." Emily explained that Walter's sale was legally flimsy at best. The buyer might have a claim on paper, but if I still held the original deed with clear ownership and there was evidence of fraud, well, we could make this very uncomfortable for everyone involved. The key word she kept repeating was documentation. So I went home and started gathering. Bank statements, utility bills in my name, photographs of me in this house over the years, birthdays, Christmas mornings, the oak tree in every season. I even found a newspaper clipping from the year Harold built the porch, my name listed as the homeowner in a little feature about porch culture in small-town Kentucky. All of it went into a folder I kept in a tote bag under my knitting basket. Walter never noticed it. In the weeks that followed, I saw him twice. Once he came by to check in, though he barely stayed long enough to finish his coffee. He walked through the house like a man measuring something he'd already bought. His eyes lingered on the mantel, the kitchen cabinets. The second time, he brought a brochure for a senior apartment complex 2 towns over. "It's modern, Mom. You'd have your own kitchenette, and they've got activities." I told him I'd think about it, smiling just enough to make him believe I was softening. Inside, I was counting the days until Emily's next call came on a Thursday morning. She'd been quietly filing paperwork, she said, laying the groundwork without drawing attention. "If you're ready," she told me, "I think it's time to set the meeting." The meeting. The moment where Walter would see me not as the quiet mother he could push aside, but as the woman who had been silently building her defense, brick by brick. I hung up the phone, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. I looked out at the oak trees, the yard, the porch Harold had built, and I felt the calm settle over me like armor. Walter thought this house was his. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon polish and coffee that had been sitting on a warmer too long. It wasn't my lawyer's office this time. This was neutral ground, the kind of bland beige space where people signed papers they didn't fully read and walked out thinking the ink would keep them safe. Emily and I arrived first. She carried her briefcase in one hand and my tote bag under her other arm. Inside that tote was everything. The deed, the proof, the lifeline I'd been guarding for weeks. Walter walked in 10 minutes later, his smile tight, his eyes scanning the room. He was wearing his "I'm in control" face. I'd seen it before, when he was trying to sell me on an idea he'd already decided on. "Mom," he said, settling into the seat across from me like this was a family dinner. "We can keep this civil, all right?" I didn't answer. The buyer came in next, a man in a tailored suit who introduced himself as Mr. Carlson. His attorney followed, young, sharp, clearly here to move things along without getting too bogged down in sentiment. The small talk fizzled quickly. Mr. Carlson's attorney cleared his throat. "We're here to finalize the details of Mrs. Delacourt's move-out and the agreed-upon transition period." "That's one way to put it," Emily said, her voice cool but steady. "But before we discuss any transition, my client has something you need to see." All eyes turned to me. I reached down, slid the tote onto my lap, and pulled out the envelope wrapped in oilcloth. My fingers didn't tremble, not this time. I laid it on the table, untied the twine, and unfolded the paper slowly, like I was unwrapping a gift I'd been saving for just the right occasion. "This," I said, my voice even, "is the original deed to my home, signed by my late husband and me. Never transferred. Never voided. Filed in the county records in 1972. And reconfirmed in 1994 when we refinanced. Mr. Carlson frowned. His attorney leaned forward, scanning the paper. Emily slid a second document across the table. Certified verification from the county clerk confirming the deed's validity. Walter shifted in his seat. "Mom, that doesn't mean." "It means," Emily cut in, "that the sale you arranged is invalid. You can't sell property you don't have clear title to, Mr. Delacourt. My client never signed over ownership. And the chain of title you presented. Fraudulent at best." The room went quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Mr. Carlson's attorney spoke next. His tone clipped. "If this is true, our transaction is null. We'll be pursuing reimbursement from Mr. Delacourt directly." Walter's face drained of color. "You can't just." "Yes, they can," Emily said. "And they will." I looked at my son then, really looked. The charm was gone. The confidence too. What was left was a man who'd gambled with something he thought was an easy win and lost it all in a single move. "I told you, Walter," I said quietly. "This house isn't just wood and brick. It's my life. And I'm not giving it up because you think you know better." He opened his mouth to argue, but the buyer was already gathering his papers. The meeting was over for him. The deal was dead. Emily packed the deed back into its envelope and placed it in my hands. "We're done here," she said. I stood, the weight of the paper solid against my palm, and walked out without looking back. Because I didn't need to see his face to know the truth had landed exactly where it needed to. 2 days after the meeting, I was in my kitchen kneading bread dough when the phone rang. I let the machine pick it up. "Mom, it's me," Walter's voice came through, low and strained. Sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this far." I stood at the counter, my hands deep in flour, listening but not answering. He went on about how the buyer was suing him for breach of contract, how the money was gone, how he just needed a little help to get back on his feet. When the message ended, I reached over and pressed delete. Some bridges don't burn in one big blaze. Some crumble piece by piece until there's nothing left to walk on. Ours had been falling apart for years. That meeting just made the collapse official. That weekend, Emily came by with the final paperwork confirming the invalidation of the sale. She laid the clean, notarized document in front of me, and I ran my fingers over my name. Owner of record. Still mine. Always had been. "I hope you'll never have to use this again," she said with a small smile. "I won't," I replied. "But I'll keep it just the same." Life after that felt quieter but not empty. I went back to tending my hydrangeas, baking for the church bake sale, walking the property lines like Harold used to. I even had the porch repaired, the wood sanded smooth and sealed against the weather. Not because I planned to leave it to anyone, but because I wanted it to stand as long as I did. Walter didn't come around anymore, and I didn't chase him. That was a different kind of peace. Knowing I didn't have to brace myself for the next knock on the door, the next plan he'd cooked up with my life as the main ingredient. One evening, I sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the oaks. The deed was back in the cedar chest, wrapped in oilcloth, exactly where Harold had told me to keep it. It felt less like a weapon now, more like a promise, a reminder that I'd stood my ground when it mattered most. Because in the end, I didn't win by shouting or by matching Walter's betrayal with cruelty of my own. I won by keeping what was mine, by standing in the truth so firmly that no one could shove me off it. Sometimes that's all the revenge you need. If you felt the weight of this story and believe in standing your ground no matter how late in life it is, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful true-to-life tales.